And I'm joined by Mr. Toby Jepson. How's it going, Toby? Great to have you back, mate.
Yeah, great. Thanks for having me again, Lee. Picking up the conversation from last time. But yeah, no, really, really, really good, and thanks for having me.
No, my pleasure, mate. It's always good to catch up with you. Like I say, last time we spoke, you just released Volume 1 from the Lookout collection.
Yeah.
You've now just released Volume 2, which is
Mm.
already getting great reviews that I've seen online. I've had my order come in, so thanks for getting that out to us, mate. And it's another great collection of stuff. I mean, for me, it seems to be the kind of reflective. You've been very honest and open about the fact that this is, a story of your own mental health journey,
Mhm.
within this particular collection of songs. And I felt like the first volume was kind of for want of a better term, the kind of in the trenches when you're kind of a bit more consumed by it,
Mm.
that kind of initial period when you're trying to work things out. Was this seemed to be a bit more of the reflective moment when you're finding your way out of that
Mm.
a bit more and acknowledging certain things. Would that be right in thinking, or?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I think there wasn't any real. I didn't have any real general detailed plan about how I was going to how I was going to organize the actual track listing.
Mm,
But when you make records, what tends to happen is that they start to form. You start to form a plan as you're making the music, and because this collection of songs was all recorded at the same time. We recorded 20 songs. I took 20 songs in, and we recorded 20 songs.
mm,
Um, that I knew that at some point, because of the nature of the narrative, because it was a painful thing to do in lots of ways, but also a necessary process for me to go through as an artist. And I think in a way it was the bravest thing I've ever done because it's not easy revealing yourself to the world, even though my audience probably isn't enormous. It still is something, and there are a lot of people looking at me, and you have to tread a very fine line between being about how you reveal these things, how you have these conversations about very difficult subjects. And it's a bit of a skill, and I think over the years I've sort of learned almost surreptitiously without me really knowing how to do it. Because when I go back to sort of things like "Don't Pray for Me" and "No
mm,
Solution" and those songs from the early Little Angels period, the characters in those stories really were me, and it was kind of cries for help. But I would never have admitted that. I would never have recognized that at the time. But of course, I'm older, wiser now. Um, but that process of figuring out how to talk about something very difficult in a kind of, for want of a better description, entertaining manner that's able to be be digested by a lot of people and not actually give away the game away. That's something I became very good at, I think, really, because it was always a sort of shadow of what was going on, but I was unable to sort of really admit that and sort of knock the nail on the head, sort of thing. So I think that was something I sort of cultivated over the years. So when I came to make this collection of records, I had two things in mind, collection of recordings rather. I wanted to be as honest as I possibly could, and I didn't want to pull my punches on that. And I wanted it to be absolutely about my personal experience through going through mental health. But I also wanted to entertain people because not everybody's interested. And that is kind of part of the problem, if you like, because a lot of people don't want to talk about this stuff. But I also wanted to try and find a way of grabbing those people too. And so, because I think you can become too mawkish, it can become too look at poor old me, that sort of thing. And I certainly didn't want that. I wanted to find that line where I could walk that line confidently, where it wasn't just a sort of um, yeah, a sort of too mawkish in its appeal. And so that was the approach going into the studio. And so all the songs that I had, I'd already kind of done that sifting. I'd gone through the lyrics. I'd got as close to the line and as close to the bone as I thought I possibly could, without it being too overbearing and too overwhelming. And then the job was how do we record them? And so there was never really a question of how we were going to routine the songs, how we were going to I was going to then put them into any sort of order between the releases. That sort of came later. But as we started to record, I started to figure it out. You start to go, hang on, those things, those tracks there, they do feel a little bit more about the sort of slightly the beginning of it all, the discussion. And that certainly was what I sort of part of the reason why I felt the first version, the first volume, it definitely tackled that. This one is definitely more reflective. I think the very fact it's got the two big ballads on it, that was definitely a decision. I wanted the center ground
mm.
on this trilogy to be um, definitive. And I think those two songs because they are love songs, but about the sort of, certain aspects of, I don't think the aspects of the direction of the love narrative, if you like, has often been talked about in this way. Actually, how you fall in love with someone early on, and then how you spend the rest of your life, hopefully, with that person, and how it feels about facing your own mortality. Especially in the kind of with the background of going through mental health and having to rediscover myself. All those sorts of things. So yes, I think it's fair to say that the volume 2 takes a different direction. I think it's in some ways it's kind of more of a full-blooded rock record in a way.
Yeah.
It's sort of punctuated by the rock tunes, but nevertheless it's on that trail of I'm finding my way out of here. And I think that's kind of being partially subconscious, but also, when you make records, the songs tell you what they should be doing.
Mm.
It's a crazy thing, but they do. You can wake up in the morning when you're in the studio and think, that just doesn't sound how it should. I wonder why. And then, within an hour or two, you can be sort of reworking it, and it's like, oh, hang on, this is it. And it's like almost like the song's been knocking on the back of your head, your subconscious going, this isn't what I am. I've got to be something else. So you sort of have to follow the trail. I mean, that's a massive part of being a songwriter. I mean, I've been writing songs for 40 odd years now, and you do become very, you become pretty skilled at it, really. And even though, and that's nothing to do with whether people like it or not, it's to do with your own level of skill, if you like, because you learn to recognize your own abilities, if you like, so.
Yeah.
That was a long-winded answer, wasn't it? Sorry about that.
But it's good, mate. It's nice to talk in depth about these things. You know what I mean? I mean, like when we were speaking last time, well, one of the things, Look Out, Volume 1 was very, like you were just saying, it was quite eclectic in its range of musical styles that you kind of ventured into in that. Where this, so there's the couple of ballads on there, but as an overall rule, it feels like a more kind of cohesive rock collection, almost like you find yourself again musically as well, or what people might know you for anyway, a bit more. Obviously, you lead out with "Don't Want to Be a Rock Star," which is a great track. Absolutely kicking over a bang. I love the tongue-in-cheek element to it. But what made you, want to open this particular volume with that one?
Well, because I'm trying to, I suppose, part of the sort of the realization for me going through the mental health stuff, and sort of, as we've discussed between ourselves, there is that sort of, there are things that you find out about yourself when you go through that process that you don't expect and are revelations, but then you realize how much a certain attitude or a certain approach to life has impacted on the way that you've lived your life. And it may well be hidden. It may well have been a hidden sort of behavioral thing or an attitude or whatever. So an awful lot of my discovery moments were based in things that were, I guess, I sort of look back at the Little Angels period as being almost like a sort of phantom career in lots of ways, because I tried to adopt a lot of the tropes and the traditional ideas of what it meant to be in a band, I think. But actually they weren't very natural to me. There was a lot of, I felt one of my big failures really, I think, in that period. And I don't say that lightly, but it's very private in lots of ways. But I do think it's a failure. Was my over sort of arching need to prove myself constantly to people, because I'd been through such a traumatic period at school where I was bullied, mercilessly, and so coming out the other end and joining a rock band and being in all of that sort of glitz and glamour, I still felt very weak and small and sort of insubstantial. But you have to take on this sort of almost like disguise in a way, so it's actually very dishonest. And so I think one of the things I felt was a big revelation to me was actually admitting that stuff to me, that what really mattered to me was the music. What didn't matter to me at all was all the other stuff that surrounded it. I've never understood the machismo of rock and roll, for instance. It just doesn't make any sense to me. And consequently, I've never really liked bands that have been misogynistic in their approach. And shamefully in my own career, I towed that line a bit as well when I was a young man. Part of it's to do with being young, but part of it was to do with because I felt I had to take part in the same world. But I now realize that I absolutely have no interest in that at all. So when I wrote that song, it literally was, I want to talk about this. I want to talk about the fact that it's actually ridiculous, the whole concept of what a rock star is. For a start, it was a media invention. I mean, I don't know a single musician who calls himself a rock star, for instance. So it's actually it's a phantom. It's yet another phantom that exists, and a kind of trope that we sort of hang on to, and it's all based in bad behavior. You know, it's not actually based in actually good behavior at all. And I think, you know, yes, it's anti-establishment, and it had elements of, you know, wanting to sort of buck the system and all the rest of it. But for me, that's just all such a load of stuff and nonsense. And I think that song, I just thought it was a great way of setting the tone, you know, because I'm playful. I'm an optimist as well as everything else. I also feel, you know, it's really important to talk as much truth as you possibly can about every aspect of your life. When you're an artist, I think that's really, really important. I think we have a responsibility to do that, actually. So it felt the right time to sort of say, hang on, I've never been a rock star. Look at me, I'm a geek. You know, whenever I perform, I do it out of pure love and joy. I don't do it because I want to throw shapes and look cool, because I've never been cool in my life, you know. So it's yeah, so it felt like a good start. You know, I'll just say that, you know.
Well, it sounds like a good start, and there's, like, you know, the tongue in cheek about it, like you say, being playfully sort of like, you know, taking the mick out of that side of music. I say that there is no, I don't know a musician that I've got to speak to who, well, anyone worth their clout anyway, that would define themselves within that sort of title. Like you say, it is something that seems to be bestowed upon them by, well, media, social media, wherever it might be. So no, to have that tongue in cheek element, so it was a good fun way. And like the whole album, again, similarly to, you know, the previous collection, and I'm sure will be with Volume 3, but it's, despite, you know, it being about, you know, your mental health and the journey to that, which can obviously be quite tough subjects to talk about and to write about, there is this uplifting element throughout the whole thing. Even on the sort of songs where you do touch upon stuff that's a bit more emotional, it still feels like there is a positive spin on it.
There has to be, because we have to have hope.
Mm.
We have to have hope. If music gives us anything, if rock and roll has delivered anything through its history, is it's given hope. It's given a sense of freedom and hope, and it's never been. You know, this might be a bit of a brash statement, and I don't know whether I'm completely right about this, but I don't think rock at its best has ever been weaponized. I think what it's done, it's a pure rock and roll in its purest form is a sense of utter joy and uplift and freedom. You know, of course, there are lots of things discussed within that bracket, and I think there are lots of great bands. Pink Floyd, I can think of as a good example, where there's some very serious intellectual subject matters that are discussed and are there, you know, for slightly different reasons, but you still love to listen to it. It still has a sense of the very fact you can create it in a supposedly in a kind of supposed free world, whatever that means. The very fact we can create it and it can be out there and people can derive something from it, can get something positive from it, because it may be something that they themselves feel but they can't talk about. Whoever those bands are that do that, however that music is, that's really important and extremely hopeful. And I've always felt that. I mean, I didn't get into rock and roll to be a dour, you know, sort of like boring idiots. You know, I wanted to sort of talk about, you know, I wanted to talk about stuff that made me feel alive. And I think that's the same. You know, just because I'm talking about mental health, or in Wayward Sons, you know, in many ways, I think I'm a kind of protest singer with Wayward Sons. I use Wayward Sons really more of a bit of a sort of like a soapbox in a way, because there are lots of aspects of life that really bother me. But I've always tried with every song I've ever written to give some kind of unjaundiced view, in a way, a kind of sense of, this is what I think about it, but let's hope we can do other things with this, or we hope there's something else at the other end of the trail with this, and get a conversation going. Because I think that's the thing. If we can get conversations going, I try my hardest not to preach. I think you tread a fine line by pointing the finger. Don't do that. I try my hardest not to. I may have made mistakes occasionally, but by and large, I want to go, look, this is what I think about it. What do you think about it? How does this appeal to you? Does this make sense to you? You know, and I am ultimately, for all of the problems I've been through in my life, I am the eternal optimist, oddly, and I've always felt that it's not my place to use my music to try and beat somebody up, you know.
Yeah, well, even on like on the track, like Some People Are Trash, I mean, that could have been deemed to be like a very, good quote yourself, that finger pointing exercise, but it doesn't have that feel about it. Yes, it's fun, and yeah, and we've all felt like that, but it almost feels like a warning and an acknowledgement that at some point you're going to have to deal with this type of person in your life, no matter what industry you're in. Obviously, you're talking to, you know, about the music industry in that place, but it happens in any kind of life and walk from you. Some point in your life, you're going to have it, and you've just got to acknowledge that some people just are, and you're just going to have to let them be what they're going to be, not absorb it, and crack on.
That's exactly right. And the image I always had in my head when I was writing that tune is like back in the day in the 1970s, it would have been two people gathered around the coffee machine in the office, talking about what an idiot the boss is, and it's what it is really. It was about the safety valve. It's that sort of like letting off the steam about, the very fact that we all have this opinion that we're the only person that knows anything. It's like my mum used to say, there's only there's nothing as, what's the phrase? There's now as weird as folk. There's only thee and me that's any good, and you're a bit weird. And I think it's a brilliant way of summing up the fact that we're all scared to death, actually, I think ultimately we're all quite, we are quite frightened, I think, ultimately of kind of being disliked and how do we impact on other people? Some people have less care about it. Some people don't give a toss. That was the point of the song, is that we're all different. But social media specifically is a heightened, version of it now, isn't it? That's now the new version of standing around the coffee machine in in the office talking to your mate about how crap your boss is. So really, it was like just acknowledging the fact that we're all different, and we can all sit around on social media slagging people off, but the reality is you're probably getting slagged off as well. So it's a question of how do we balance that? And of course, as that lyric ramps up, I changed subtly. I tried to subtly change the way that the inference of the statements is. So it starts off as being quite aggressive, but as you move through it, it talks about actually more shifts onto your own perspective. So it was kind of calculated, really.
Oh, nice. I mean, when we last spoke about everything, you just said to release Volume 1. You and Dave were then going back in the studio, tweak some things for Volume 2, changing some keyboards up and things like that with Dave. Did that change the sort of overall tonality of any of your songs in particular, or was it just building up the additional layers at that point?
No, and it didn't change any. I don't think it changed any of that stuff at all, really, because you have to, like I said to you earlier, you have to let the song dictate the terms. You have to follow its trail. It tells you what it wants to be. Often, sometimes, like I said, you wake up and you go, oh God, we haven't got it right. And we certainly did that with Falling in Love is Harder. I reinvented that song about 4 times, and it was mainly to do with tempo. So when we sort of recorded it in the studio, we recorded it at 1 tempo. And then woke up the next morning and I thought, do you know what? This is too slow. So we recorded it at like, I think 4 or 5 BPM faster. And I thought, right, that's perfect. When I got it home and I put it on about a week or so later, I couldn't believe how fast it was. I was like, oh my God, we've got this wrong. This is just killing the song, So, of course, we couldn't go back in the studio. So I had to use studio trickery. I had to use elastic audio to slow the drums down. Didn't change the drum track at all, apart from we slowed it down in real time. And it took us Dave was here when we were doing it. And it took us about 6 attempts to get the tempo right. And that was with Dave playing along on the piano, me busking along on the acoustic. And this is after we'd recorded the bloody thing in the studio. So like we were kind of, oh my God. But then we hit the tempo and all of a sudden everything just went click. It's like, no, that's it. The chords feel right. Dave was playing it. It felt cool. I was singing it. It felt and there it was. But up until that point, it was a disaster. It was like, oh, this is not going to make it. We couldn't figure it out. It was all to do with the tempo, all to do with the way that the mood then was propellant from that tempo. Too fast, killed it. Too slow, killed it. Had to get it right. And these things are the battles you go through when you make records. And it doesn't always have that problem. But certainly with that song, that's a good example of it. I mean, we did go back in the studio and reinvent all of the guitars. Me and Sam went back and we went and redid all the guitars again, because when I got home again, I felt we'd rushed them. I didn't think the sounds were particularly great, and I'd had other ideas. I mean, actually having a bad back for 6 months helped Volume 2 because I couldn't actually physically stand up for about 3 months, and so I was able just to keep listening and sort of reevaluating, and I made a list of things I needed to do. So.
Well, with that song in particular, and Falling in Love is Harder than you prepare your heart for. You said in the introduction that you thought it was one of your sort of most standalone kind of songs. It's definitely got that crossover vibe. We're talking about, you know, as overall having a kind of more of a rock vibe on this collection, but it definitely has that crossover. But for me, that's got your most emotional raw vocal I've ever heard you perform on it. It's just so honest. You know, there's you know, my dad always used to say to me, you know, there's a strength in vulnerability, and I think that's true on this album. You show, and then the other previous collection, you know, you show that much of yourself so openly, and it takes a lot of strength to do that. And I think on that song in particular, that really sort of sings quite highly.
Well, thank you, and I really appreciate you saying that. And it took a number of attempts. I found it very hard to sing. Often got a lump in the throat. I mean, it's a very, very personal message. It's me being rawly honest about falling in love with my wife and being with her for so long, and then facing the fact that I've got less time in front of me than we have got behind me. And what does that mean in terms of, you know, my children who are all in their 20s now, and how you value those things and how you can easily lose sight of that stuff. And I think, again, going through the mental health struggles shone a light on my relationships with the people that are the closest to me in such a way that it made me really look and really examine that and examine myself about my own behavior and how that has impacted on their lives, and how much I wanted to, you know, be a lot more careful and give thanks to them, you know, because at the end of the day, however much longer life I've got left to live, the idea of that is, you know, it's like I say in the line, there's a line, you know, this beautiful disaster, you know, it feels like that to me. Falling in love with someone that you feel so completely connected to, and then have children with, and then live a life with, that to your eyes doesn't look any different. And you know, every day you wake up, you see the same person still just as fantastic as they ever were before, and feel such joy and love for them. It still feels like a blink in the eye, you know, like where's this time gone? Where has it gone? You know, and it does feel like a kind of crazy disaster. That how can you feel this, you know, and know that one day it's not going to be there, whether I die before my wife or she goes before me. You know, it's that I don't think that subject is talked about enough, and maybe people don't want to. People, I think, do put it to the back of their minds and don't even consider it. But I do think there's a need to acknowledge these things. I certainly feel there is. I'm not saying everyone else feels that, but I certainly feel there's a need to acknowledge it, because you know what? It's later than you think, and who knows what's going to happen. And I certainly don't want to leave this, shuffle off this mortal coil without letting the people I know that I love the most and care about the most know that, and know that I did my absolute best. And so writing that song and coming to sing it, it was difficult. I mean, I found a lump in my throat a lot of the time. It was very hard to sing it because it felt so real and so authentic to me, because I'm telling the absolute truth, you know. And it's yeah. So there's maybe 8 or 9 different attempts, and you know, 8 or 9 different compilations of that vocal to just try and get as much out of it as I could, and be as rawly honest as I could about it. Because there's no hiding. You write a song like that, man, you can't hide.
Well, no, yeah,
You can't pretend. It's literally, you have to commit. You put it on you wear your heart on your sleeve, and that is, you take that. You have to own it. You know.
I mean, when you know, I mean, you can hear it throughout the vocal, but like particularly when you say sing, you know, the love you gave me was the only thing that ever saved me. You can hear like your voice cracking in the just that right way, where it's like, you know, it's not, it's added that emotion to the song. It makes it real. It makes it honest. It makes it like you say, that thing. And I'm not surprised it took you a few attempts to capture a vocal on a song like that, to be honest.
Oh, and I avoided it, man. I tell you, I avoided it. It was the last track I recorded. I just kept putting it off and putting it off because I was scared. I was literally, you know, it was. I knew it was going to be tough because I had to sing those words, you know, because you're singing, you do a number of takes, and then you'd evaluate what takes you've got, and then you'd put your edit together, and then you have to sing it again. And so I did all of that probably half a dozen times before I really thought, oh God, I've got this now, you know. And it still brings a lump to my throat when I hear it. And you know, and the thing is, it's, you know, somebody asked me a question in another interview a couple of days ago, which really struck me. Is like, you know, how do you, you know, how does it feel when you write something like that? And it's a very hard thing to answer. What I can only say about it is that it no longer belongs to me.
Yeah.
The act of writing the song and performing it was incredibly private. It's so acutely private. It's hard to put it into words. But as soon as it was done, and as soon as I sent it to the mix engineer and we were mixing it, I separated myself from it because it no longer is mine. It becomes a product of the universe. You put it out and you hope people like it, and then it becomes the audience's property in lots of ways. I know that might sound strange,
No, it doesn't.
but it has to be that way because otherwise you'd never let it go. You have to regard it as a piece of entertainment and a piece of, it's like a chapter in a book. Okay, we'll read that chapter now, and so it's kind of like you push it out into the sea and you watch it sail off into the horizon. And actually, this one, I'm in a crazy way, I actually really feel glad that I've got it out because I think it would have stuck in me too deep if otherwise.
Do you think if you left it any longer to, obviously, sometimes people will write songs and they sit with them for a while because they're not right for whatever particular collection that's going out, whatever album, etc. Do you feel like if that one had been left on the shelf for another project, so you weren't doing this collection, that one would become too personal and it might have just sat on the shelf?
I think that's a really good question, and I think yes, it would. I think you have to find your moment. I've often thought making records, you're marking time is what you're doing. Really, you're giving yourself, well, you're giving as much of yourself away as you're willing to give away whilst you're making records. And I've made as a producer and as an artist, working with obviously other bands as well. I've made over 40 albums now, and I know how to make records, but it's always just as difficult each time you do it. It never changes. So it's kind of, you have to take a sort of deep breath. What are we doing? Where are we going with this? So if I'd have left that song through, and I only would have left it because it would have been through sheer fear in lots of ways, because it's so personal. But if I don't think I could have done it, it wouldn't have been a Little Angel song. I couldn't have done it for Wayward Sons. It had to be now, and yeah, a bit like exercising a ghost in a way.
Fair play, man. I mean, also on this album, I mean, I'm guessing you did it at the same time, but the strings that are on that sort of add that richness to it. Did you do them at the same time as the strings for this collection?
Oh yes, yeah, they were all done, all done at the same time. The guy that arranged the strings and put them all together was a guy called George Hall, he's a old mate of mine, fantastic string arranger, and we work very closely together about the tonality of that and how we approached it, because there's lots of different ways of doing strings. You can have huge orchestral 64-piece orchestra, or you can contain it and make it a little smaller so it becomes more intimate. And we plumped for a small, it's sort of like somewhere in between, really, sort of like a 12-piece sort of sound, and that that gave it that thing, and he was pivotal. I mean, George was pivotal in terms of being able to reach, I think, the layers that perhaps I hadn't done before, and other solo material. And I was absolutely determined, you see, to make sure that if we were doing strings, they were integrated from the start. Same with the horns, they integrated from the start. We weren't just throwing the horns on for the sake of it. We and Dave very carefully planned it. We voiced the strings and the ideas to George and left him to then orchestrate it. So yeah, it was quite a long and drawn out process, I've got to say.
No, I bet, man. I bet. So are you looking to do any live shows with this and take it out to a live setting? I can imagine doing like the last one we just said be quite daunting for a live performance, but
yeah, I think there's mutterings of it. We're talking about it. I mean, bizarrely, next year is a year that apart from possibly one project which could come to fruition, Wayward Sons are taking a year off essentially to make another album. We're making another album at the end of next year, which I will be writing through the year. But there won't be any live shows from Wayward Sons. I doubt I'll go and do another run of acoustic shows because I've kind of done that now. So if we do anything, it probably would be some Toby and the Whole Truth shows. I am quite interested in that. I mean, the only thing I would say about it is that it needs to be in the right environment. I sort of think it would be better for festivals because I could play some from the first album, from 95 for the Ignorance Bliss record. I could play some tracks from this collection, and I'd probably throw in some Little Angels. You know what I mean? So it would be, I think it would suit in that kind of environment. I don't think I'm not really that keen on doing clubs with it. I think it needs a sort of slightly bigger palette, a bigger platform, really, in a way. But whether I can find any promoters who are interested in that, I don't know.
Well, all they got to do is hear this, mate. And I'm sure they would be interested in getting that out there because there's definitely songs on this I'd love to hear live.
Cheers. No, and I'd love to play them live. I mean, that's the thing. It's it takes on a whole different, of course, as we know. a different feel, doesn't it? Of course, you know. So yeah, and it's what I've always done. You know, it's arguably what I do best, I suppose. Really, is actually going out and taking the music out there. It's something we all love, and I'd love the opportunity. Yeah.
That's fine. So what does the rest of the year hold out for you, Toby? What is your plans for the rest of this year?
Well, I've entered the film industry quite heavily. I've been writing for film. I think we may have talked about this before. I'm sort of a screenwriter really, so I'm a professional screenwriter now. I've got a film that's been made that I wrote that's been made in Australia next summer, which is a thriller. I've written and that's yeah, I mean that's quite a big budget movie, so that's happening. I'm shooting my debut as a director next year in February, March, which is an
Cool.
independent low budget film, which is a kind of road movie. And I've got a film about the music industry. It's called Belly of the Beast, and it's and it examines the abuse in all its kinds within the music industry, and it's about a serial killer. Well, actually, it's actually about, well, it started out as a serial killer, but now it's about a revenge. It's a revenge thriller about a rock star who becomes a serial killer. And that's a very tough film, but that looks like we're going to get that greenlit at some point next year. So next year for me is going to be a very healthy mix of making films and writing films and writing music and recording.
Sounds like a good year ahead, mate. Sounds like you'll be busy as always.
Yeah, well, I'm not shy of work, and I like working, and you know, the film thing's been, I've had it all in my life, all my life. I made movies as a kid. Obviously making music videos with Little Angels was a big thing, because back then you made them with film directors. You didn't make them with, you know, unknown people. It was always big film directors. So we did a lot of that, and I was in the film industry for 3 years as a stand-in and working on various different departments. You know, so I know the film industry quite well. But this is the first time I've done it as a creative, if you like, creating stuff for it. And it's been sort of quite a long-term project of mine. But yeah, coming to fruition, thankfully. Yeah.
That's cool, man. Have you got plans or a timeline yet for when you think Volume 3 might be out? Or
Well, we're working on it at the moment. I've actually, bizarrely, it's the one that's at this particular stage in its life is the most ahead of the others, weirdly, because when I was doing Volume 1, I recorded some master vocals when I had a real good week. You know, you often sort of get a week where everything works great and you're singing great and it all sounds fantastic and, you know, blah, blah. So I nailed all the vocals for Volume 1 in that week and also carried on. So I completed, I think, 4 master vocals that I'm really pleased with and I won't be changing.
nice.
But we are going back and reinventing the guitars again for the same problem. So we had the same problem with the sound. So me and Sam are going back in the studio beginning to middle of October to complete all that stuff. Then it'll be finishing the vocals, getting the backing vocals done. You know, just tidying up, mopping up anything with the percussion and bits. Dave's got some bits of keyboards we want to replace. Nothing much. So I would envisage that it might be even Christmas, but don't hold me with that. It might be, most likely, I think it's probably likely to be in the new year, probably January sometime, would have thought. Because that was always the plan. I mean, the layoff was because I had my bad back, you know. So, you know.
Well, I'm glad to see you doing better on that, mate. Because last time I saw you, you really were in a lot of pain.
Oh God, it was awful. Honestly, I wouldn't. It was again a massive wake up call. You know, what do you do now? I mean, I'm going to be 58 in a couple of weeks' time, and it's like, you know, I don't want to be a cripple. I don't want to be you know, sort of immobile. And you can see how easily you could become that way if you don't deal with, you know, I have had a chronic back issue, and but I've worked really hard with a physiotherapist, and I'm now running 3 days a week and in the gym 3 days a week, strength training. So it's completely revolutionized me. So I'm definitely back. I'm far better physically than I've been for probably about 15 years right now.
That's
So
brilliant, mate.
yeah, feeling good. Yeah.
No, well, glad to hear it, mate. And Tobes, thanks for your time, mate. It's been great to catch up with you as always, mate. Really enjoying this collection of songs. Can't wait for Volume 3. Hopefully, you'll take it down the road and I'll get to see these songs live. At the beginning of the interview, I'm going to play Falling in Love is Harder, just because we've talked so much about it. But what song of this collection would you like us to play at the end of the interview?
Do you know what? My favorite my favorite of the rock tracks on this collection is actually Strong Enough. So I'd like you to play Strong Enough.
That's another one for raw vocal as well, but yeah, with the meaning behind that, mate. So like, yeah, definitely lock that one in. So we're locking Strong Enough for the end.
Great stuff.
Brilliant. Well, thanks for your time, Toby, mate. It's been great to catch up with you as always, pal.
Thanks, mate. Really appreciate it. Thanks for your time, and thanks to the listeners. Appreciate it.
No worries, man. Speak soon.